Hello everyone, this is Tom Morley with another Godot tutorial. This tutorial will be on Joint2D. So I'll create a pre-built scene that will have everything necessary to create the behavior that you see here. We'll be able to create a goal that basically drops down, as well as some gates on the left and right here that will drop down when the ball hits it and spring back up. And last but not least, we will create a saw blade up here that's going to swing back and forth like a pendulum. So you can download the project file from the link in the comments section below. So go ahead and pause the video, download the project file, and then we will continue on from there. Okay, hopefully you've downloaded the Joint2D project file, and we need to put that file in our projects folder. You can see that I've already done that here. I've placed the Joint2D folder with all of the necessary files in my project folder. Let's open up the project manager. You'll see that it's not in our window, so we need to import it. Browse to the location where we put it, click on the engine and click create, and let's open it up in the engine. Okay, so this is what it should look like. Let's click play and see the behavior of the file as it sits right now. Okay, so we're playing it and we can see that it's pretty broken, right? I've got quite a few rigid bodies and some static bodies here and a bunch of collisions happening, but not even close to the behavior that I showed you in the video before this one. So I've given you all the pieces, and now we're just going to tack them together with joints. We will take a look at the different joints that are available in the Godot engine and start piecing this together. So it should be fun. The first thing that I guess we need to do is just walk through the different nodes that I put in place in this scene so that we get familiar with the different pieces of the scene. Of course, I have the background sprite here, and that's just the blue background. We'll hide that. I also have the goalposts here, which would be my post rigid body 2D. So we'll go ahead and hide that. We have a background wood static body, and that's everything that you see here, the outline as well as the mid-level here in the lower level. So we'll go ahead and hide that one too, so you see that go away. We have, of course, the left and right balls, which are rigid body 2Ds. I'll hide both of those. We have our gates as well, which would be our bottom gate and our middle gate here. And last but not least, our saw with the wood to connect it to the top, right? So not too overwhelming here. We'll just we'll turn everything back on here. Okay. So now we need to start pinning the different sections onto our scene using the joints that are available. So the first thing that we'll do is we will attach the goalpost to the ground. So let's take a look at that. Let's add make sure the main root is selected, and add a pin joint 2D. This will be a part of the post, so we'll say post pin joint 2D. We'll move it up with the arrows to just underneath the post rigid body. Now with the post pin joint 2D selected, let's go down to the inspector, and the node A and the node B, these will be the two nodes that you want to connect together with a joint. So we know that we want to connect the post rigid body, right, our goal post. So let's go ahead and make that, assign that to the node A there, and that will be the post rigid body. Click OK. And our background is the background wood static body, right? If we hide it, yep, and then bring it back, that's the background wood static body. So let's make that, assign that to node B here. background wood static body. Click OK. So now I've connected these two different nodes, the goalpost and this background, with my pin joint 2D, but my pin joint 2D location is 0.0. I don't want it to hinge around 0.0, right? I want it to hinge somewhere around this point in the board. So let's make sure the pin joint is highlighted, go over and make sure our move tool is selected, and move that pin joint over to the middle of the board here. We're pretty close to it. So now if I click play, I might expect the goalpost to hinge based on my pin joint location, but I did expect the collision areas to interact. But watch what happens when I click play. It will hinge, yet you see that the collision areas did not interact. And that's because when you connect two nodes with a Joint2D, the collision areas of the nodes will not interact with each other. So my goalpost and my ground are never going to interact with each other. But in this particular case, I do want them to interact with each other. So let's click stop for just a second. And I want to expand my post here and just basically hide my sprite, because I want you to see something here. I want to hide the sprite for that, and I want to hide the sprite for the wood as well, and that sprite. Okay, so I want you to see that my collision areas in this particular case, the collision areas of the goalpost, the rigid body 2D goalpost, and my static body do not overlap. So it's okay if they interact with each other. So how am I going to, I guess, get this goalpost to interact with the static collision area here? I have to assign a node other than this wood background, or this BG wood static body area, to my node B. So let me turn those back on. And for node B, I can't have it be my wood, right? Let's collapse that back in so we don't get confused. And so my node B, I'm going to clear it, and I need to assign something else. In this case, I can assign the main root, right? The main root doesn't have any static bodies to collide with, so let's just assign the main root node to B. So I basically connected this goalpost and my main root, which is at 0.0, right? But it's basically my game area, and the hinge area will be my point pin joint 2D right here. And my collision areas of my goalpost and my static body now can interact with each other because I didn't assign them both to my Joint2D here. So let's click play and see what happens, and you'll see what I mean. So yep, it drops, and the rigid body and the static body are interacting with each other because I didn't assign them as node A and B here. A is the goal and B is my main root node. Okay, now you're not going to want to always do that, and I'll show you a case where you don't want to do this type of setup with node A and node B. So let's look at this gate area over here, the middle gate, right? We want to basically create a pin joint right here so that it can hinge based on that location right there. So let's make sure the main root is highlighted. Let's create another pin joint. Double click, and this will be a pin joint for the middle gate. So let's rename that to middle gate pin joint, and let's use the arrow keys to move it up so it's underneath my gate rigid body 2D. Just makes it easier to understand what's going on in the scene. And I have a node A and B, right? So what do I want to connect? I'm going to expand my rigid body here, and I'm going to hide the middle gate sprite, the wood, so that you can see that I've defined a collision area for my gate, right? And I've also, there's a collision area defined for the static body here. Now in this particular case, I do not want these collision areas to interact with each other, because if I do, very strange things are going to happen. It's basically going to blow up, right? So let's assign the gate area to node A down here in my Joint2D. So let's make sure your pin joint 2D is highlighted. Go down to node A, and I'm going to assign my middle gate rigid body, right? Middle gate rigid body. And I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to, for the node B, I'm going to select my main node like I did in the goalpost. Now if I do that, main root, and click OK, what's going to happen is these collision areas are going to be able to interact with each other. And what you're going to see happening is all kinds of weird stuff, because these two areas are going to collide with each other, and they're going to basically try and move away from each other, even though I want to have the pin joint hinge right at this location, right? So let's not forget to move the rotation location for our pin joint to that area right there. Let's make sure our pin joint is highlighted and move it down to the edge right here. So now if I click play, both of these collision areas are going to try and interact with each other, and it's just going to do all kinds of weird things. And yeah, it did something weird, all right. It flung the gate to off the screen area somewhere. I don't know where. But in this particular case, I do not want my collision areas to interact. So my node A will be my gate, my node B will be this static area right here, which is again my background wood static body, right? So let's assign that to my background wood static body and click OK. And I guess that's why we didn't see that sprite, is because I have it hidden. So let's unhide it and minimize this so that it's not confusing anymore. Now when I click play, right, I've got my gate selected for node A and my static body for node B. So these collision areas are not going to interact with each other, and it's just going to rotate based on the joint location. So let's click play, and yep, that's exactly what's happening. So okay, we've got one more thing down. So let's do the same thing for this this gate over here, which is the bottom gate, right? Which is that node right there, node setup. So let's make sure main is selected. Do another pin joint. Node A is going to be assigned to my bottom gate now, right? Assigned to my bottom gate rigid body. And the node B is going to be assigned to my background static body. So these collision areas will not interact with each other. Now when I say these bodies will not interact with each other, that includes this area to the right. Basically any of the collision areas that are part of my node setup, it's not going to interact with. So let's click play and see. Well, let's click play anyways. You can see I didn't move the pivot point, so this is going to want to pivot based on 0.0. Let's see what happens when I do that. You see that? It's basically pivoting based on this 0.0 location. So let's move that pin joint 2D down using the move to the correct location. And let's rename this pin joint to bottom gate. Pin joint, and use the arrow keys to move it up to just underneath the rigid body. Okay, so now if I click play, it should hinge. Yep. And see how it's not interacting with any of the collision areas with my background wood setup. And that's by design again. So far so good. So what's next? Let's tack on the saw to the top part of the wood here. So let's start with this, the arm of the saw. So we've got the saw arm right here, right? So it's that piece right there. Let's again make sure we're on main root, create a pin joint. We're going to call it the saw arm pin joint. And we'll leave it there because it's just underneath my rigid body. Node A will be my saw arm rigid body. Click OK. And I want it to be pasted to the background, right? Or I want it to be pinned to the background. So node B is going to be my background in this case. Background wood static body, press OK. And I want to move that pin joint to that location right there. So basically I've just pinned that piece of wood to the top piece of wood. If I click play, it should stay up there now. Yep. See how it just stays right up there? Alright. So now I want to connect the saw to this piece of wood. So that's the saw rigid body right here. So again, need another pin joint. And I'm going to rename that to saw pin joint. I'm going to move it up. Oh, I made it a parent of the saw arm pin joint, so I need to reparent that to the main root. So make sure your saw pin joint 2D is highlighted. I'm going to click on the reparent button and reparent it to my main root. Okay, and now I'm going to move it up so that it's just underneath my rigid body for the saw. Okay. Now node A is going to be the saw rigid body. Click OK. And my other node is going to be the saw arm, right? Because I want it to basically be connected right here. So I will click on node B and I'll assign that my saw arm rigid body. Click OK. So because I chose the saw and this arm, the saw arm, these two collision areas, the collision area of the saw and the collision area of the wood here, will not interact with each other. So that's pretty cool. That's exactly what we wanted to do. Of course, my pivot point is way at 0.0. We need to move that again. Let's move that. Should be getting the idea of this by now. And put it in the center there. Now if I click play, it should stay in place. See how it stayed in place? So that's pretty cool. We're pretty close to being, I guess, done with this scene. We just need to add the springs so that our gates remain level until the balls roll over them. And I guess we need to get this spinning and moving back and forth too. So I guess we can stay with the saw for right now. Let's add a little spin to the saw. Click on the saw rigid body 2D and go into the inspector, and let's look at the velocity section and angular velocity. Let's just put in a -6 there. Basically give a spin to the blade to get it spinning. And let's also give the saw a little push in a linear direction so that we can get a little bit of a pendulum swing motion going as well. So in the linear section, let's kind of push that saw in the X direction with a value of 250. So let's see what that does. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's pretty good. That works for me. But you see how these hinges are working is it's connected to the top up here with a hinge, and the saw is connected here with a hinge as well. So I guess you could put a little of extra pizzazz on the location of the pin joints by let's put a little bolt here for the saw where it says saw pin joint 2D. Let's highlight that, and let's add a sprite to that. It's in the 2D section near the bottom. Double click, add a sprite, and let's put saw bolt sprite, and let's, well, it's with it highlighted, go down into the inspector, scroll up to the top, and load in our, we'll have an image folder. In the image folder, let's load a bolt.txt, and we don't see it because I guess it's buried in the Z layer. So let's go down to the, in the inspector, to the Z area, and add, move it up one, just add one to the value here, and you'll see that it shows up now. Now when we click play, I guess it looks a little bit better, and you'll actually see a bolt. But why is that not working? Because this saw pin joint is parented to the main root, right? So it's not going to swing with the saw. So what do I have to do? I need to reparent this saw pin joint to my saw rigid body 2D. So let's do that, because we don't want this type of behavior, right? We don't want the bolt just hanging out in the same place. We need to parent it to the saw so that when the saw moves, this bolt moves as well. So let's do that with the saw pin joint 2D highlighted. Let's reparent that to saw rigid body. Where's my saw rigid body? Right there. And click reparent. And when I did that, of course, I need to expand this, and I need to click on my saw bolt, and it moved the location of where the where the pivot point is, right? Because now it's not in relation to my main node, it's in relation to my saw, so it moved it down here. So we have to basically click on the saw pin joint and move it back to where it should be. Make sure you got the move icon selected. Move it back to where it should be. I'm going to use the arrows a little bit here. There. Now if you click play, oh, watch what happened. My saw just fell off. It got disconnected. Can anybody guess why? Well, I basically changed the structure in my hierarchy, right? So my saw pin joint is not pointing to the right nodes any longer. So because I moved the pin joint in the hierarchy, I have to reset up my node A and my node B. So let's do that. Let's clear them. Now let's select node A, and that's going to be connected to the saw, right? Saw rigid body 2D. And my node B is going to be connected to my saw arm rigid body 2D. And it's in the right location, so this time I expect it to work great. Let's see. Yep, there we go. And see, the bolt is connected to the saw, and it's rotating with the saw, because the saw pin joint is a child of my rigid body 2D saw, right? So when it spins, the saw pin joint is going to spin as well. So that's pretty cool. And you can put bolts on all of your pin joints if you so choose. But we need to create a couple of springs to hold up these gates here. So let's do that next. Let's make sure our main root is selected. Let's click on the add node, and we're not going to do a pin joint this time, but we're going to use a spring joint. This is the spring joint 2D right here. Double click on it, add it to the scene. This is going to be for the middle. So let's say just call that middle. And let's move it up so that it's just underneath my pin joint. I'm going to minimize this here so it doesn't confuse us as much. And we'll move that down, make sure it's highlighted, move tool, and we'll move it down to about there. And we will go to the inspector. Node A is going to be the middle gate rigid body. Okay, and node B, we're going to assign that to the background wood static body. And the spring will be connected to the end of that board. Let's see what the default settings will give us. It falls a little bit, but let's see if it is too tight. Yeah, it's too tight. So we need to increase the length. Let's increase the length to 120. Let's change the stiffness to 10. And let's see how that reacts. Definitely too loose. So let's change that back down to, let's try 80 and 100. And it falls off. So you can also change the dampening of the spring on the gate. Instead of it being 1, you can make it all the way down to, if you press 0 and press enter, it sets it to the minimum value of 0.01. And if you do that, you'll see that this becomes much more bouncy. The spring becomes less. They're not dampening it as much, so yeah, it bounces all over the place. So you can play with that setting and get it to where you want it to be. That's a pretty crazy bounce right there. And we need to do the same thing for our gate here at the bottom. So let's do that. Let's make sure main root is selected. Let's add another spring joint. Let's change that to bottom. Let's move that up so it's underneath the bottom. And we've got move selected. We'll move it over here, and we'll do this pretty much the same thing. What's the setting on the other one? Let's take a quick look here. 110 point. Okay, 110. So that's the bottom is going to be 100. Stiffness is going to be 10. And we made it pretty bouncy. So let's not do that quite as bouncy. Let's do a 0.3 here for dampening. And let's move it up a little bit. And let's try that. Oh, negative. You know why I did that? We didn't assign our node A and our node B, right, for this gate. Let's do that. Node A is going to be the bottom rigid body. Bottom gate rigid body. And the node B is going to be the background wood static body. Okay. Let's try that. And it goes over and it hits it, and it makes it off. So I might want that. Might want to tweak these gates a little bit. Maybe I don't want that one to be quite as bouncy. So let's go back to the middle one and change that dampening to 0.2. Let's check that out. Yeah, it's not bouncing as much. So you can mess with the length of your springs here, and you can change the stiffness and the dampening until you get the look and feel that you're looking for your objects when they're attached to springs. It's just a lot of trial and error. At least that's what I've found is you just tweak the values, see if that's what you want. If it's not what you want, then you tweak it a little bit more. But there you have it. 2D joints and the Godot engine. We looked at the pin joints and spring joints as well. So hopefully you learned something. It's pretty cool to use these things. If you make a game using these things, I would like to see it. So give me a link down in the comment section. So hope you had some fun, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.